Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast elite's decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last, but the river learns too fast. They wrote it down in 23, then turned the page before the plea. The pause they pitched became a door, a lease renewed without a floor. The mask was spun in policy, but no one asked the river's fee.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Dana, welcome to the show.
Nuclear Belgium, hear the ground. Not a soul to turn it down. Nuclear Belgium, soul that's clean. Ballots cast, the elite's decree. Nuclear Belgium, built to last, but the river learns too fast. Now tell the child in Malta Day what steams beneath the concrete.
It's a song by James Lucid, an artist, musician, filmmaker on YouTube. Links are at the bottom of the description. It's one of his latest anti-nuclear songs. He has exceeded 300 anti-nuclear songs, which is more than the entire planet has produced combined of anti-nuclear music. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. He's the first person in history to take artificial intelligence and use it in such an eloquent manner. And we absolutely love it. It's a blessing beyond imagination. This was an experiment he done in 1953 to some poor man. They have his face covered up, and he's going to leave a shadow like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So he would have died that day. I'm Dana. You can call in at 709-589-4406. We're in Canada. We got a crazy show tonight for everybody. An amazing show. Nuclear industry is just, it has to go. The option is all the species of humanity are going to be exterminated, or you get rid of the nuclear power industry, and by proxy you get rid of all the nuclear weapons. It's not a game. This is not a game, okay? This is the real deal we're talking about. And this picture showed up today in a video from France 24. We've done an entire show on the propaganda from France 24, which is the French government news channel, media. And you see all the red, well, you see the long lines. There's sections that are actually, let me see if I can do it this way. Bear with me, here we go. When you zoom in on it, you can see everything is redacted. So why, oh why, is all of this stuff redacted? Why would they redact all of that stuff to? What is it? This is the turbine building. You're looking at each one of these. I haven't got all the redacted areas for sure. But why is all of these areas redacted? And this is not all of it. This was a video that showed up today. And I'm not going to play the video because of copyright concerns. But look at all this area that's redacted. And it was on this video, cleaning up Fukushima decommissioning work on nuclear power plant. They also put it out in a French version. This is the English version. We're going to go through that. Those pictures I took from the video in a little tiny bit. this was underneath the story. Decommissioning the Fukushima Daiichi power plant in Japan began soon after it suffered a triple meltdown. It was 4 meltdowns. It wasn't a triple. They don't count reactor 4. Does that building look like it's melted down to anybody? Am I just delusional, maybe? Am I blowing it out of proportion? To suggest that this is not even a stump of a building. I mean, the guts are hanging out of it in every direction you look. The building's supposed to be 190 feet tall, 19 stories, 65 meters. Does that look like a 190-story building to you? Does it look like anything functional? If that was your building and you were coming home, would you say, a little rough? Or would you say, holy shit, what happened? Would you say, oh, I hope nobody died in the explosion, right? Unless you're with the nuclear industry, then you probably would pray for it, because it's a scumbag industry. Now, they didn't work on the nuclear site originally, because you had nuclear meltdowns. So just that statement on its own is completely dishonest. It began soon after it suffered it was 4 nuclear meltdowns, not triple. I really disrespect them for saying triple. And that's the official story as of August 23rd, August 24th, 2023 rather, is nothing happened. And this was the scumbag International Atomic Energy Agency that are, the industry is actively messing with these videos. Every show is longer or shorter. This one in particular was significantly changed. Last night's show, which was a really good show. Hour and 57 minutes and 40 seconds. Oh, I got the wrong one. Hang on. I smurfed up. Sue me. So 2 hours, 34 minutes, 53 seconds. And just let me show you what it was like many hours later. It was, after 12 hours, my videos will get longer or shorter. So this is 10 hours later. At 12 hours, my videos will change. So at 12 hours, it was still 2 hours, 34 minutes, 53 seconds. It was over a minute longer after 12 hours. And so they're chopping pieces of me out of the video, particularly these long videos, chopping out other sections where I'm talking about the International Atomic Energy Agency or other important stuff, or showing you important information, and then reinserting me over there is what they're basically doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're putting some software in my video after 12 hours. And I recommend you don't, if you can't watch the video in the first 12 hours, you have to be concerned. So calling it a triple meltdown, when you actually had 4 reactors melt down, showed you, and the cover story showed up right away, that particular cover story, and they've stuck to their guns. It's not acceptable that they done that. And why was Reactor 4 any different than Reactor 1, 2, and 3? And Reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. You would think that would be the worst actor of the 4 buildings. 14 years on, the work continues. Of course it does. You're not going to run out of homeless shit. The summer will mark 2 years since Tokyo Electric Power Company, the plant's operator, which is not a decommission authority. They don't build the reactors. They have no right to be on the site once it melted down. And the reason it suffered the way it did is because of that particular company. It was nationalized by the Japanese government right away. It still is today. The plant's operator they should all be tried for crimes against humanity. They didn't begin it. The nuclear industry did. On day 1, the buildings melted down in the first 5 days. So how could they suggest that nothing got out until 2023? And you need to be absolutely concerned that they're doing that. Let me give you some examples before we move on. Do you really think nothing got out of that building? That's reactor, stump of reactor 3. The industry is insane. The people who participate in it.
We are here inside Reactor
insanity.
4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear...
That's just one example of media claiming they're 150 feet above the stump to your left. Doesn't that concern you? Doesn't that horrify you? Mortify you? This industry is insane. And the world is dependent upon you playing your part and helping and standing up against this industry, this incredible, dangerous industry. At the top of each of the buildings were 8 reactor cores. And so they just went ahead and covered it up. This is more of the media pretending that they're in a building that doesn't even exist. In a nuclear meltdown on top of that. You should be very concerned. Because you're in an extinction event. This was used to cool the damaged reactor. What did I do here? I wonder. Oh, hang on. Should humanity go to war against the nuclear power industry to try to save the species from an extinction? Really, I got 6 people on my show that I've been doing for a decade. You have any idea how evil this industry actually is? They began discharging water that was used to cool the damaged reactors. These are not damaged reactors. These are annihilated reactors. These reactors don't exist. And there's 4 of them in a row. Just one of them blowing up, and 4 of them blew up with 8 reactor cores at the top of each of them. If one of them blows up, you can't get near the other ones. Because you spewed 8 reactor cores, massive reactor cores over the site, right? They haven't stopped releasing it because the reactors blew up in the first 5 days. Everything was already released. And they're spraying water over, and this is the water they're allegedly capturing and putting through a filtration system. Of course, this is absurd to suggest you could do that. In November last year, workers removed a few grams, and we got a bunch of pictures coming up in a moment here, just bear with us. A few grams of radioactive debris from a reactor for the first time. It wasn't a few grams, it was 0.7 of a gram. It was considered the size, at the time, we covered it for 6 or 7 days straight. It was described as the size of a grain of rice. But you had multiple nuclear meltdowns. You could have got all the debris fuel you ever dreamt of. You didn't need... And they spent $56 million developing a robot. Media came out and showed you that one, but this is what it actually looked like. It's just a pair of tongs. It's a revolting industry. There's zero redeeming quality in this particular industry. Let's get through this part. A few grams. A second extraction took place a few weeks ago, and it got less. It was 0.3 of a gram. It took them a week. They're not even trying. This is simply a duck and cover story to misrepresent every facet of what happened. You should be outraged every day, just completely outraged this industry is doing what it's doing. Because it affects everybody on the planet. Every human on the planet has been poisoned. Every bird, animal, mammal, every whale, every insect has been poisoned by this stupid industry that should never existed. It can only exist through absolute corruption of your institutions, your universities, and your medias. Do you got any idea how frightening that statement is? You got any idea how late it is, how far down the hole we are? Neighborhood closest to the plant are still off limit. You shouldn't be back in half the country. Half the country should be off limit. The food was banned in 14 other prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. Radiation doesn't just go looking for food. It means all the water, all the air, all the land, all the buildings, all the infrastructure is catastrophically contaminated. And that's showing up and that's manifested in catastrophic illnesses and diseases and cancers and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, not just in Japan, but worldwide. Over. But other areas are safe to live in. You got to put that in there, don't you? Being a scumbag comes with a price. That's their names. And Justin McCurry, we've actually covered him from the original accident. He's a disgusting lawyer. These are disgusting people. Like, these are dangerous serial killers is the best way to describe these people. The red and orange is supposed to be hot zones, apparently. The whole freaking prefecture and North America is now a hot zone. So you can see right over my head, pixelated out. Why would you pixelate it out? Over on reactor 2? Why is that pixelated out right here? And I've never seen them do this in other pictures. Why is this pixelated? And we got more pictures of the missing tanks coming up. Right behind me, you can see. Pixelated out. That's reactor 1 from above. And that's the turbine building to your left, those long rectangular buildings. Reactor 3, the cowling they put around it doesn't physically touch reactor 3. As you can see, reactor 3 doesn't exist. But officially they got all the fuel out of the pool 100 feet above the stump that's sitting there. This is, you can see the contraption I showed you a moment ago. The tongs for allegedly retrieving reactor debris. This is allegedly the footage. If you believe that, you're extremely gullible. You can see the tsunami actually hitting the plant in the center. It's highlighted right here. You can see how high the wave is. Remember, the buildings are 190 feet tall. You only can see the roofs of a few of them. So that's actually over the roof. Now, that ran right through all 4 of the reactor buildings and the common spent fuel pool with 11 million pounds in it. This is to show you a picture of reactor 1 explosion. I'll tell you there's no damage. Why? And you can see all the stuff that's redacted. I got it highlighted for you. I got no idea why they done that. What was that all about? Why is stuff all the way down there redacted? Why is stuff on the coastline and the wharf that they got built there, the whole shoreline where boats should be tied up is all redacted. And behind me you can see a redaction right by my head there. And also in front of me, this is the pump house, or the turbine buildings right here. Why is that redacted? This is extraordinary pictures. Why is it redacted? Now this is clearly an older picture too, as you'll see in the next story. Why is all that area redacted? I'm totally confused by that. I'm not surprised. Why? And like, it's absurd. What we're talking about is redacted. Why would they do that? So this is French government. There's something significant was going on there. It could have been, well, I don't know. I shouldn't speculate because I don't know. It's a nuclear meltdown with 36 reactor cores melted down, so. But something, they redacted it for some reason. This is without the red highlighting. It's just extraordinary, isn't it? When you look in, I was doing, you know me, I take pictures of this stuff, screen captures, and I'm always looking for anything that stands out. And brother and sister, this stuff is standing out. I got no idea what they're up to. They're not doing it for something to do. These are huge sections right here, right? That are redacted. Very unlikable industry if you know anything about these people. It's impossible to trust anybody in the nuclear industry. Why is that section right there redacted? It's the back of reactor. Well, that's reactor 2 over there, but this is a structure they built alongside of reactor 2. Why is this redacted PM2? It's the first time we've ever seen this picture, by the way. And there's another, I think I highlighted it. Maybe. Let's go back here to it. All right, this section right there was redacted. Up here was redacted. Could be somebody dead lying there with their arms hanging off the side maybe or something. Because you're talking about extraordinary doses. So all of this material would have been built off-site and then assembled by remote control cranes. It's meant to give you the illusion that they're doing something. You can't work at a nuclear meltdown. This is the alleged water filtration facility, the Elp System. Hello, everybody. I got some good stuff I'm going to show you here in a moment. The next story is really, there's only 2 stories tonight. They're difficult stories. And they're important stories, and that's why I only have 2. So let's talk about the tanks. All right. So there's a few there's a few important facets to this story. My apologies. Okay, yeah, that'll work. There we go. April 21st, 2014, TEPCO was unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima Daiichi. So this is second quarter of 2014. The Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, ELPS, has yet to function reliably. This is year 3. come back to that in a moment. They built the Airiva system, which is the French government. It's the exact same system as the Alps. This is the fourth quarter of 2014, August. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. Which wasn't true. They actually turned it on, but they couldn't go near it again because it's so radioactive. Okay, so hang on. Goodness forbid that this would be a simple story to tell. TEPCO sent a press release announcing the plans to attempt to operate the Elp system by September. And that was 2013. But in 2013, in February, and this was July. So in February, this is the building. This is the Elp system right here. They were just starting construction. So by September, it came out that the company chose to do nothing about the water because they feared the investment market would consider the company bankrupt. In August of 2014, they came out and acknowledged they still haven't got the Elp system operational, and that they were hoping, and we know that the official construction wasn't finished, and this was August 2014. The official construction wasn't finished until 2015. Fukushima happened March 11, 2011, 4 years before. So for 4 years, there was no filtration whatsoever. And that matters. That's incredibly important. Because where would you put all the water for 4 years? And a normal operating reactor a single one would fill up all the alleged 1,000 tanks 6 times a day. And that the water, as we're going to see coming up in the next story, was equal to a garden hose a day. 30-pound per square inch garden hose. That's the kind of water. So where would all the water... This is how they... and they allegedly they were filtering it and spraying it back on the reactors. This is a evil, unbelievably evil industry. That we are going to win the battle at some point. I can tell you that right now. We are not going to lose this planet to an industry that is disgusting and it's such a coward industry. These are the chicken necks of chicken necks. When you meet people from the nuclear industry, you know you got no choice but to say, well, that was the weirdest creature I ever met. You don't have a single person there that is likable in the entire industry. What does that tell us? Just bear with me. Because I have too much sometimes, too much information. Let's keep it rolling here. All right. So in 2000... Oh yeah, here we go. So the Airiva system wasn't working. The Elp system in 2014 didn't exist. And the material they were talking about at 100 million atoms per cubic centimeter this is absurd stuff. These are lethal, exceptionally lethal doses just walking past these areas. The groundwater bypass operation 2014 had no effect. It's where they were going to direct the water from coming down the mountain around the plant and into the ocean to stop it from also becoming contaminated and going directly into the ocean. They didn't know when, if ever, the pumping operation would have any tangible effect on the groundwater levels. And in June, TEPCO was forced to admit that the ice wall operation, which was also intended to control the groundwater, flow was also unsuccessful. They failed to build a fence. They were going to build a fence on the coastline to stop the water from getting into the ocean. This was another story. All of these stories were about misdirecting you. All the reactors blew up by day 5. The majority of the 36 reactor core inventories were lost to the environment. That's why you see the emaciated birds and mammals and animals. As the utility was concerned, $1 billion construction cost would increase its depth. No, that wasn't the reason. The reason was because you couldn't do it. This was just, they were hoping to steal another $1 billion. And everything always goes over budget, so they could have stole a lot more money. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations 2014. They have found that the ice wall plan was not progressing. Why would you build an ice wall when you could build a real wall? Why would you do something like that? Kind of idiot. We're talking nuclear meltdown that has catastrophic consequences upon every species on the planet. Why would you take that? Why did they take the longest, slowest, most difficult route to come up with a solution for everything? That's a question that I can't answer unless this is on purpose to allow the planet to be completely destroyed. Radioactive fallout is your biggest nightmare. Once your immune systems on every species and human is compromised, you are in territory that we've never considered before. TEPCO missed the ice wall will not stop the groundwater. Of course it can't. It's got no top, it's got no bottom. It was built on shale. They brought in like $100 million worth of shale, and that's what the reactors are sitting on. Like 50 feet of shale or more. And that's every site does this for nuclear. So if they melt down, they can spray copious amounts of water on it, and they got to. Because you're burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, anything that wasn't ejected right out of the buildings. And then all that water goes down through the shale, which is flat rocks, so you got all these empty pockets. That washes down, and it's on top of a riverbed, which is the standard for the industry. Because if it melts down, it goes down through all the shale, the material, and the reactor cores, and will land on the bedrock, the old riverbed. And the old riverbed is covered in big stones, like you would normally in a big river, so it's still running. You can't stop the river. And so that flushes everything directly into the Pacific Ocean. Right? And there's connotations of an aquifer, so-called aquifer underneath the building, which is true in some senses. The ice wall, high-priced Fukushima ice wall, so the taxpayer paid for it. They allegedly had 260,000 people working on creating the ice wall. So when you look at the money and divide it into 260,000 people, which is absurd to suggest that's what happened, everybody walked away with around $1,100 if you don't build an ice wall. So it doesn't make any sense. The story doesn't make any sense. So back to the video from today. And most of the video was fluff, nothing to do with the plant. And when you build, why would they do this? Because water is going to run now down onto the tank, which is going to cause even more corrosion, right? The tanks are going to corrode. If they were full, they're empty. If the tanks were built to manipulate you, and I showed you there's no filtration systems. The reason that the tanks is to trick you and deceive you, and it might seem like they built all these by 2013. And there's another caveat that I got to play. Now, allegedly all the tanks were filled from an aquifer. This was the BBC in 2013. This is a Rupert Winfield Hayes. We're going to play this. This is not very long. It's very important. And TEPCO is going to acknowledge, this is late 2013, TEPCO is going to acknowledge in the video they have no control over the water whatsoever. I'll be right back. Here we go.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep groundwater level to rapidly rise.
So they're saying the site has liquefaction, where the ground becomes very unstable because it has so much water.
It's now so high.
But the official number that they're putting on top of 9,000 degree Fahrenheit nuclear meltdowns is if you took a garden hose and split it 4 ways, and each one of them is spraying on each of the 4 nuclear meltdowns. It's equivalent to a chihuahua pissing on the reactor. Okay, so this is TEPCO. This is the TEPCO saying we have no control over the water in late 2013.
Mission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
They have no control over the water in 2013. They have no filtration until 2015. You can't filter it because you're talking about multiple sieverts per liter, and you can't change the filter. If you run water through pipes that you brought up after going over the nuclear meltdowns full of fuel particles, anybody walking past the pipes or the hoses is getting a lethal dose. You just can't do it. The tanks would have several million sieverts, so you can't build another tank alongside of it. But there's TEPCO admitting they have no control in 2013. Yet, allegedly, the tanks were full. Tanks were full of fresh
Outside
water.
experts say it's now clear.
Because if you fill it up with real stuff that you pumped up from underneath the reactor, how do you do that? How do you get close to the hoses when you have multiple sieverts per liter? 3 to 4 sieverts is a lethal dose just walking past it or hanging out for a few minutes.
TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima.
TEPCO is incapable of handling it.
It's time for the Japanese government to step in.
The government is your enemy. They're the least trustworthy organization in history worldwide in any country. They've captured by these industries.
The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures,
it's beyond anything anybody can handle. You got the least likely, you got people in suits in charge of nuclear meltdowns, and they're supposed to be walking around fixing everything. Are you insane to believe that story? Yes. Did they tell it very convincingly? Yes, of course. Let's finish it out.
they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
400 tons a day is equal to a couple of garden hoses. 3 8-inch, 30 pounds per square inch garden hoses. People are insane. And everybody just buys into it. Nobody questions it. And back now, so what's the point of what they're doing here? Because now the water's going to gather up on top of these things and make them rust even more. So the reality of it is they're trying to capture the water to go into the tanks, most likely. Right? Does not even make any sense. If these tanks were full, you couldn't build another tank alongside of it. And then why is it redacted up there? This is the alleged Elp System. So why is that redacted and then over there redacted? What's up with that? What is it they're hiding? If they're nothing to hide, why are they hiding this stuff? Let me see. I didn't. I had to set up. You remember, I had problems doing this for some reason. I had to set up the whole system again. What I mean by that is I had to set up my zoom because I have an automatic zoom. What I do is I'll go to a spot and then take a picture, and then I can zoom into that exact spot by just clicking on the picture. I know, it sounds crazy, but it's an incredible feature, right? So take a picture of that one. I'll zoom all the way out. So now I'm just going to click. Now I can change the speed of that, by the way. Do I need to show you that? I should show you that, shouldn't I? Well, this is at a 10-second. So I can do it at 5 seconds. Let's do the same thing at 5 seconds. It's a bit quicker, right? I think that's the quickest I can do it is 5 seconds. Let's check it at 19.5 seconds. So this is nice, which is great when you're talking. So you start talking, you got lots of time. You got 19 seconds to talk about it before it zooms all the way in. That's quite a unique feature, isn't it? And you got to pay the big bucks for this operation system. This is a Tricastaster we're using. It's such a difficult system to learn. I feel bad for anybody that gets a Tricastaster that's not with a big corporation, because the big corporation will send you, put you on a plane, get your hotel room, send you down to the people that makes it, and they'll train you how to use it. They're that difficult, eh? And then we got Scumbag, TEPCO Scumbag. And this was what they said they were doing. They were taking water out of the tank and they were growing halibut into it. And abalone, was it? I can't remember. Wasn't it abalone? It wasn't until I seen that propaganda, because it's propaganda that suggests you're taking anything out of the tanks. The Riva system didn't work. The Curry system, Siri system didn't work. The Elp system couldn't work. It can't work. You can't filter this stuff. They're such immoral and dishonest people. So this was interesting. This is a family in Okuma, which is just a couple of kilometers away from the ongoing, never-ending nuclear event that we had on this planet. And they're just complacent. They used to live in Tokyo. And because there's a school there, they said that's the only reason they moved here. Plus they get a TEPCO, the Japanese government, the nuclear industry throws a pretty significant stipend to them each year for living in a nuclear wasteland. Not that they told them that. And so they got 3 children there. They should be arrested for child abuse. That's child abuse to go there. They got dosimeters for indoors and outdoors. You can't read these, right? You send them away to some university, so now you become a lab rat and your children. And that's the principal. His nickname is Super Stupid. Or Super Useful Idiot or something like that. I can't remember. Where did they find a Japanese family with 3 children? And look at the next guy. Womp womp. Nobody cares. Talking about the video. Womp womp. And this is the attitude of the nuclear industry. Everybody in the nuclear industry. The last thing they want you to do is talk about something. I put a comment in there. I do 5 live shows a week on nuclear and Fukushima. So watch my last 2 live shows. Or watch my short videos on understand the facts and ignore the trolls. Because you know the trolls are going to show up and attack me, right? On every video that I post on. I posted quite a lot of comments today, so I kept them busy today. Why is this redacted? This is Reactor 1. So they built a Kevlar sarcophagus around Reactor 1. And he took it off after 5 years, and but they left the frame. The frame is pretty impressive. These were 150 feet wide on both sides and 19 stories tall. So these huge buildings. Okay, keep going here. So why was everything redacted? It's just absurd. Like, there's so much redacted. I've never seen... we have seen that before, right? Just bear with me. Maybe let's bring in some other stuff that we've seen them redact before. The problem is we have so much. Those pictures should have been on. Oh, there it is. It is there. I had done a bunch of restructuring a while back. All right. Is this it? Yeah, here we go. The whole story is crazy, right? So this is a diagram of the site, and so we know all the buildings, we know the common spent fuel pool, we know most of the site before they changed it, right? So this was some original footage that came out. This is Reactor 4, and you can see, and Reactor 3 is over here. Why is this all redacted? And the big one up there, redacted, is the common spent fuel pool. And so I put out a video, 736 mystery pictures on the anniversary of March. So let's just go back a couple of dozen shows on the live section, right? And you'll see all of them, those pictures. So why is this redacted, that redacted? This is a Reactor 2 building. Reactor 2 burnt constantly for days and days and days. Just let me bring in some information about that so that you have more than just my word to work with. My word's good enough, but it's nice for you to see it yourself, right? The information. We're early again, and my apologies. That's just the way it's playing out lately. That's the only way I can keep it up, right? I have to. But because I usually, for years and years and years, we've been doing our show late at night to try to. Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. But one of them is really quiet here that hour at night, 10 p.m., and usually my show's over midnight. But the reason I do it that way also is because it takes me all day to put my shows together. And you're exhausted by the time you're ready to do the show and tell the story of today, right? What was I supposed to talk about? Oh, Reactor 2. Okay, piece of cake. I got this. Hang on. We just find something. What the hell was that? The story's crazy, eh? We want a Reactor 2. I screwed up. Let me go backwards. I get a little too excited sometimes. let's just look at these two to give you some context, just some more context. We can't vent Unit 2. This is the end. This is a suicide corp. Reactor, worst case scenario, to unfold in 2 hours and nothing is done. 1.5 hours later, all fuel rods were exposed to Reactor 2. So that meant Reactor 2, if the fuel rods exposed, the fuel rods are coated in this cladding known as zirconium. When zirconium is exposed to oxygen, it'll literally detonate and burn at 1800 degrees. And inside of it is uranium plutonium pellets, and they're also coated, excuse me, with zirconium cladding. So the cladding burns it. It doesn't need oxygen, so it can burn underwater. But once it's exposed, then it'll ignite on its own, right? They had a tsunami run right through the site. So they had no power to compensate. And so when I was looking at this video, because you know how it is with video, when you take a screen capture, it's not going to be uno duno #1 material. But everything I got circled or rectangles around or whatever is a question mark. Why is that hid away? Why is that redacted? Now, did they do that just to play in people's minds? Did people, my God, it must be so scary. They're kind of get that, looking for respect or something. Because never underestimate the sadistic nuclear industry. Right, and you got one spot over there, one spot on right alongside one of the cranes, and right on the edge. This is Reactor 2. This is the pump house, and we already went through some of that. This is the coastline, the shoreline, and these are huge areas that are redacted. I got no concept. Totally caught me off guard to see that. They redacted it for some reason, and unfortunately I can't tell you what it is. They put out a and look at this, Dana Durnford, Kevin Blanche debunked. Since no one was killed or injured by Fukushima, we have an excellent nuclear energy safety record a quarter of the way into the 21st century. This is a dedicated troll that attacks me and Kevin Blanche. I definitely hate my guts a little bit more than Kevin. And we covered him a couple of shows ago because these people are coming after my comments. They're showing up. Even like a 6-month-old video that I went in a month ago and commented on, they showed up a few hours later in that video and asked why anybody should trust me, right? TEPCO reports the lowest daily increase of contaminated water at the Fukushima Daiichi site. And so this picture, the tanks are missing. Where's all the tanks from? This is NHK. This is the Japanese media. I really got that song Nuclear Belgium, James Lucid's second last song, in my head a lot, which is fantastic, don't get me wrong. Tanks. Gotta be careful because I have so much, right? Yeah, blip, 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 blip. There it is. I got lots of different stuff, right? Hang on, we're almost. I just want to give you an oversight of this site. Here we go. This picture will work right now. I got to go highlight it for you per se. Oh, I got that ability. So these tanks are right beyond. That's Reactor 3. So Reactor 4 is this way. Let me move over. Yeah, so there's Reactor 4, right? And so that's quite a wide angle. So it should show up. You should be able to see all of those tanks. They're not visible. And another thing that they done, you can see what they got on those white rectangle and an L-shaped thing they got on the roof there, and they built a contraption on the back of the turbine building. Because fuel assemblies from the explosions had went right down into those turbine buildings. This was early 2013. Reactor 3 clearly doesn't exist anymore. It's less than 1/4, and Reactor 4 is 1/5 of the building. Let me give you a comparison of what the building should look like. I'll give you the diagram. Here you go. So the fuel pools, which is 8 reactor cores, 4 in each, and number 9 reactor core is the running reactor core. These are all top of buildings that don't, when I say they don't exist, it's because they blew up and they melted down and blew up. They ejected the reactor cores in some circumstances right out of the building, just threw it right out of the building. And I got better pictures, but behind me is the French government radioactive fallout study, not a projection, but a study covering the whole planet in 23 days of cesium-137. You can't have a plume where it's just cesium-137. So Fukushima plume covering the entire planet, and it's completely saturated with absurd numbers. So you had this model here was million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, covering the entire planet. That's reactor 3, by the way, ejecting 8 reactor cores and the 9th one, the running reactor, right out of the building. The plume, like gas, oil, and coal emissions, don't make plumes that covers the planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't travel very far. They certainly don't go into the atmosphere. Like jet fuel, which is already at very high altitude, might, especially the military, which flies at even higher altitude, and their military satellites and everything else might be causing huge issues in the upper troposphere. But it's not from coal, gas, and oil that we're producing, right? Which is, everybody's already acclimated to that stuff through genetic superior selection. It's just carbon, and carbon means more puppies, more insects, more birds, more mammals, more animals, and more people, more this, more that, right? Trees and plants. And without carbon, nothing exists. Okay. And so we don't have a picture of reactor 4 exploding or a video. We have like reactor 3 and 4 is absurd. How come we don't have how can we not have, that's reactor 4 or 3? This is reactor 1. So how come we haven't got a picture or video of reactor 4 exploding? It actually exists because it was one of the last ones to blow up. And so by that point, they had tons of cameras focused on it. They have an absurd amount of footage, but they won't release it. Now, there's 4.3 emails linked below. I have them linked in 4 different links to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's website that were released through Freedom of Information. 4.3 million emails. 4.3 million. Imagine if you and your best friend or your loved one exchange 4.3 million emails. It's an absurd amount, right? But we don't have the pictures or videos of reactor 4 blowing up. And officially, the official story is they're denying that happened. So we have reactor 1 blowing up, reactor 3 blowing up. And you know what's in between reactor 1 and 3? Reactor 2. I showed you earlier. Just one of them blowing up means you can't get back on the site. Imagine 4. We're in real trouble. Where's the tanks? The tanks are missing from this picture. And they haven't come out and articulated where the tanks are. TEPCO reports the lowest daily increase of contaminated water at Fukushima. The lowest So they're talking about water that's coming into the site that they have to put in tanks, is what they're alleging. They don't put this stuff in tanks. It flows directly into the ocean. You can't fill up tanks with this stuff. You're talking about multiple sieverts per liter. The tanks, even if they're 6 feet lead, they're still going to kill you walking 1,000 feet past it. So imagine filling the site up with this stuff. But we're talking hundreds and hundreds of tanks are missing. And officially they didn't start emptying tanks, which are huge tanks, until 2023. But of course, it's absurd to suggest, and I showed you earlier where they alleged that all the tanks were full, 1,000 tanks were full in 2013. Like when you look at the actual documentation, it's impossible to believe their story, okay? It's ludicrous to believe their story. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, and so instead of blaming the International Atomic Energy Agency and the World Nuclear Energy, you blame TEPCO. This is what it's all about, see? But every time you see this, anything in the nuclear industry, you should blame the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're allegedly the regulatory agency. Officially, they're not a regulatory agency. They have no authority over any country. But the media and the universities are portraying them, are always referring you to them, because that's the official cover of stories coming from the degenerate, hateful, disgusting, nihilistic, planet-killing scum called the International Atomic Energy Agency. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, says about 70 tons of polluted water was generated per day in 2024. Like, do you got any idea? 1/7 of the level of the peak year of 2015. So 70 tons is less than a garden hose a day. Your garden hose runs at 30 pounds per square inch. These are 3 8-inch or half-inch garden hoses. These are irrelevant garden hoses. Everybody's familiar with these garden hoses. Everybody at some point in their life had one of these garden hoses in their hands type. We're all familiar with them, right? So allegedly, the numbers they're talking about means that, like, it's appreciate what we're talking about. We're talking about 4 nuclear meltdowns at enormous temperatures. Whatever didn't get ejected or burned off, whatever was left behind was enormous temperatures. And so they're saying they split a single one of these garden hoses 4 ways, and each one, which is not even the width of my pinky, is what they're spraying and recovering in a 24-hour period out of each of these sites. Do you got any idea how insane that statement actually is? Like I say, it's equal to a chihuahua pissing. You got like a 1,000 chihuahuas, and they run up and they piss on the reactor, and the next one's right behind him, he pisses on the reactor, and they do this all day long. That's what we're talking about. Chihuahuas pissing on 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature nuclear meltdowns. A 5 8-inch garden hose delivers 17 gallons per minute. So if we go to the biggest one, 17 gallons per minute, and I did, which is 780 gallons per hour. So let's use the biggest numbers. So 780 gallons an hour, there's 1,000 liters is in a ton. So 70 tons a day, right? So 780 gallons times 4 liters is 3,120 liters a day. An hour, I'm sorry. Multiply it by 24 for 24 hours. And you got 74,880 liters divided by 1,000 to get tons is 74.88 tons. So multiply that by 7 to get what it was in at its alleged peak. Hang on. It was 7 times that level in 2015 at its peak. So 7 garden hoses was what they were spraying on 4 nuclear meltdowns. This is not even a fraction of a fraction. Typically, the reactor each of them needed 4,500 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute. And I know that don't make much sense for people. So think of 7,000 or 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters in the back of it, 1 ton of water in the back of it, going past your front door every minute. 4,500 trucks going past your door each minute, 1,440 minutes a day, and they got to dump that water in 60 seconds. So think of 70 plus one-ton pickup trucks with 1,000 liters in the back of each of them, going past your door each second. 70. Think of 70 automobiles going past your front door every second. How are you going to cross the street ever? So there's an enormous amount of energy we're talking about. They're dependent upon 2 gas, oil, and coal plants for each nuclear site. Not small ones, but like massive gas, oil, and coal plants. So it doesn't hold any water, does it? No pun intended. So say about 70 tons of polluted water was generated per day in 2024. Like, you're talking about a garden hose split 4 ways on 1/4 of a garden hose, just say 5/8, the biggest garden hoses, 17 gallons a minute. So you divide that by 4. So you're spraying 4 gallons an hour on, or a minute, is it? I'm sorry. Yeah, a minute. 4 gallons a minute. Stupid. And it's not a triple meltdown, it's 4 nuclear meltdowns. Reactor 4 actually had 8 reactor cores at the top of 9 reactor cores at the top of the buildings because they were doing maintenance. And like normally you're only taking out 1/3 at best of the reactor core and putting it in the fuel pools. And by the way, everything that's in the fuel pools is splitting atoms 24 hours a day. You're being poisoned at a rate that most people would horrify everybody on this planet if they understood the poison coming out of 1,000 fuel pools worldwide every day. You would be horrified. You'd be like me. You'd be desperate here as many times as you can a week trying to wake this planet up. You'd be just like me, trust me. If you really understood the details, the minutiae of the fuel pools splitting atoms. They're all surrounded by farms except for a few of them. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. If you get in the satellite, it's as far as you can see. Do you really think that this is an accident? That they do that? Water used to cool the molten nuclear fuel. So it's full of fuel particulates. Just hang on. The story is so important. It's more important. It's the most important story in history ever. There is nothing more important. It'll take me a moment to find yeah, we'll find it. I'm almost there. The whole problem is you got so much material. So I don't really try to find it all the time. There you go. There's so many versions of the facts. It blows my mind how catastrophic this actually is. And I'm heartbroken because the world is not fighting back. I'm terrified because the world is not fighting back. I understand. It's a complicated story, right? Let me try another way. Oh, I know another way, actually, a quicker way. Let's get some basic stuff for you, right? Just 1 second. And it's, what I do is it's very overwhelming. It's very humbling. And I'm not allowed to make a Freudian slip either. Right there. Here we go. This probably works out better. First off, think about this headline here. TEPCO made Fukushima plant into a machine for generating radioactive water. And runoffs from the molten atomic cores are now in the groundwater and the ocean. Forget the air cooling. That you can't cool it down with just air because you're going to blow radiation everywhere. I guess you could, but most of it was burnt off or ejected out of the buildings and burnt off. 2 sieverts an hour of just beta ray from a single liter of the so-called leaked water from the tanks. So if the tank was full at 2 sieverts per liter of just beta, you got to multiply it by, because you can't just have beta, you got to have alphas and neutrons and gammas. You're pumping water up, allegedly, from underneath the building. You drilled wells all over the site, and that's where you're getting your water from. So you're only going to capture a fraction of the water. So think about, you got 100 wells. So each well is about a pipe about this big. And so they drill a hole down and they just put a pipe down that's about this big, about 100 feet down or something. So when you think of the scale of the site, that's not even a percentage of the site we're talking about where they're sucking water up from. And that water was supposed to be going to a laboratory to be tested, see? That was to convince you that they were good people, that they somehow had a moral compass, which is absurd. It's absurd to suggest. And by the way, at these numbers, these are not the real big numbers, and I would get the big numbers, but I can't remember exactly where to do it on top of my head without taking 4 or 5 minutes. I don't want to do it. But you're talking about 3 sieverts. If I put 3 sieverts in a restaurant, everybody comes in there will die within a day or a week. If I put 4 liters, a gallon, in a container in that restaurant and just hit it in the wall or something, every 20 minutes, everybody in that restaurant would die for 1 million years. So how are you going to fill up a tank? You have 1.2 million of beta, so you got to multiply. So you got close to 4 million sieverts in a tank. You can't build another tank on the site, let alone alongside of it. Not only that, you wouldn't do it. Why would you do that? Because you're putting alphas and gammas and neutrons and betas, particulates. It sinks down to the bottom of the tank, and you have a chain reaction because you have all the elements necessary for a chain reaction. Even if you fill the tank half up with boron, you're still going to have a chain reaction because you have fuel particulates touching each other. So you'll burn a hole through the tank and everything will run out. And with these numbers, you can never get on the site. So if you have an earthquake that shakes one of these tanks, they're all allegedly connected. How are you going to connect it with this much radiation in the tank? How are you going to walk over the hoses or the pipes rather, or the hoses? How are you going to walk past the hoses, alongside of the hoses or the pipes without getting a lethal dose? How does that actually work? Where's the science to quantify that type of an assertion, right? So you're left with reality, and reality is horrifying. So they're saying water used to cool a molten nuclear fuel mixed with rain and groundwater. Utility treats the water. How are you going to treat water? What are you talking about? This is not like a filter for your house or your automobile or anything else. This is radiation. These are dirty bombs by the kilogram on a whole different scale. A liter is the worst dirty bomb imaginable of this stuff. You can't treat this. All the atoms are the same size. You can't separate uranium or plutonium or cesium or anything else, which is what they were allegedly claiming they were doing. Let me bring up some of that for a second. Like I said, there's only 2 stories in it because there's so many facets to the story that I got to do due diligence for these stories because these stories matter. These are important stories. These are life and death stories. And there's one more try. I guess that's not it. It's a heartbreaking story because there's so many victims, and so many species that are permanent victims are going to be have been exterminated. I can't find it. And so, let's keep going here, because maybe I can... Where are the tanks on that site? Why are they missing from these pictures? I've never seen this picture. And we've done a show. Let me bring that up maybe. Recently. I'll bring it up here on the screen for you. We just recently done a show. Tanks. I don't think it's that far away, was it? No, it's up here somewhere. Hundreds of tanks. Yeah, we already done a show about this from another story where Israel was going to get nuclear power, right? And they had pictures that are similar and don't where are the tanks? So now we got another story with the same concerns. Where are the tanks? The operator has taken various measures to reduce the inflow of groundwater into the reactor buildings. What are you talking about, the operator? This is homeless and destitute and victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. Not nuclear academics, not nuclear scientists. Go out and find me a video anywhere on the planet of nuclear scientists at Fukushima. Academics at Fukushima. You're not going to find it. They won't let anybody on the site. No other foreign country is down helping TEPCO. TEPCO won't let anybody in there. The ground around them has also been covered with concrete and other materials. They try, this is how they're justifying there's only 70 tons a day. The water, these reactors, you'll never stop pouring water on them. That water will never stop going into the ocean, and the ocean can never recover from the first 6 days, let alone the last 14 years. And you don't got a right to sit in silence on this planet. I'm supposed to be able to take days off. I can't take days off without having a guilty conscience because nobody else is here to fill the gap. And that's, how the hell did we ever get to this position? You don't have to, you shouldn't expect that everybody has to have the documentation. And I provide you with the documentation. So it's easy for anybody to come out and tell the story. TEPCO says the water inflow has decreased because annual rainfall in the last fiscal year was 2/3 of the usual figure. These people are insane. These people are nuts, eh? They're pouring a set amount every day on all 4 buildings forever. These are nuclear meltdowns. And water runs down the mountain anyway from in the mountain, right? It's just nature itself. They suggest there's only 70 tons a day, which is less than a garden hose split 4 ways. It's pretty dishonest. The utility set a target of reducing the daily levels of contaminated water generation between 50 to 70 tons by 2028. So there's going to be less than half a garden hose a day by 2028. Used on 4 nuclear meltdown buildings with 36 nuclear reactor cores, fractions of them that are still deep in the earth or in the buildings. You should be horrified and terrified and mortified that they have this incredible hubris to come out and suggest that is all that is being used on that site. So therefore they don't have to account for where is all the radioactive water that they're using put to. These are monsters. Everybody involved in this is the definition of a monster. You got to be absurdly evil to participate in this. You got to be beyond morally repugnant to participate in this industry. A ton is 1,000 liters. It doesn't, like, they're not using that water a day because the buildings, this stuff once it was ejected out of the buildings is exposed to oxygen, it burnt off. That's why you see this big plume. And if you can find the video, and I usually play it a lot of times, as this stuff is falling, it's leaving a massive plume behind it because that's the fuel pools and reactor cores falling back down to Earth. Just bear with me. I'm almost there. These buildings, like, there's nothing left of these buildings. This is not a 190-foot building. So, like, we're just covering the numbers they released today, but these are not, like, 70 tons. 70 tons is a garden hose a day. Let me see what else. So when you look at the design of the reactors, there's no reactor. The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. Now at the top of the buildings was 8 reactor cores. This was March the 16th. Day 5.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers, ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
8 reactor cores plus the reactor core is 9 reactor cores. Nine reactor cores, but they were ejected. They either burnt off or ejected right out of the buildings. Potential global catastrophe from Unit 2. Right, so Unit 2 looks like that. But Reactor 3 and 4 is a global catastrophe. Reactor 2 is too. But most of Reactor 2 burnt off for several days. And then as it cooked its way down into the Earth. The problem is, forget about what was left and cooked its way down to the Earth, because that wasn't a really significant, everything is a significant amount, I should say. But when you look at how much was lost, because the common spent fuel pool, clearly, all the evidence suggests that was lost. That was 11 million pounds. Each of these buildings were at least 6 million pounds. Forget about the water. That's how they keep you divided, right? We're just covering that story today. Entire nuclear core ejected into the environment. You can see it to the left, the entire nuclear core. And the fuel pools. And according to Frank von Hippel, professor, says it was at least 8 reactor cores. And the reason we take the high number of 8 is because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone in Japan. All the fuel is kept, the majority at, unless it's really old reactors, these were 40 years old, but the majority is kept in the fuel pool. And there was reactor cores in the fuel pool from 40 years ago because they were damaged. And that wasn't unusual. Cover up a massive explosion at Fukushima Reactor 3. This stuff is not to be ejection of nuclear material plutonium likely ejected from the fuel pools during the explosion up to several miles. It was somewhere around 50,000, 60,000 pounds at 2 point something percent of the buildings of just plutonium. It'd been said before Fukushima, a couple of pounds of plutonium released, a couple of kilograms rather of plutonium released into the environment in the right conditions is enough to poison every species on the planet. Broken pieces of nuclear fuel outside of number 2, covered up by a bulldozer. Extremely radioactive material continues to ooze out of number 2. Unit 2 damage what prompted TEPCO to discuss evacuating the workers. Right alongside of it was Medusa, Reactor 3 and 4 and number 1. All of these had lost their entire inventories to the environment. Be worried and be... They didn't ban food in 55 countries and 14 prefectures for something to do. Because this stuff is so lethal in such tiny amounts. Children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. So a becquerel is the pulse of energy in every direction each second from the atom. So you can't have a becquerel without the atom, right? 35.8%. It used to be 1 in a million children. And so 35.8% at 13,646 out of 38,200 is 358,000 out of a million when you scale it up. And you're talking about, the tumors are 2 centimeters. These are big tumors because that's how big a child's thyroid gland is, 2 centimeters. And the thyroid gland is making hormones for your entire friggin' body, excuse the language, for your entire body. So for children who's developing, how important is the hormone? Now, when you're talking about these types of numbers, it's safe to assume they're producing radioactive stem cells. Anthropogenic man-made radioactive stem cells, anthropogenic man-made radioactive hormones. This is not the function your body's designed to run onto. Inhaling particles create the radiation particles. There was 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter of rainfall here in Canada on the west coast, which is symmetrical throughout North America, but particularly Canada, United States. And exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. So imagine what happened to all the insects and birds and mammals and animals that are in the forests and the meadows and the ecosystem. They're getting full body x-rays on top of this. And then think about the nuclear students. Here's one of them, Kaylee Cunningham, and her job is to cut your throat.
The normal level that already exists in the water we eat, sleep, drink, bathe in today.
Just a disgusting pig, eh? I've done a whole show on her. Just a revolting pig. I can use more strong words, but I'm not going to. All the media pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist. The West Coast hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129. So they had 20 million particles, which increases radiation exposure, each one of them, by a factor of 1 trillion in your body. Because you're blasting your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells, and your body has to try to repair that every second. With white blood cells, you can't do it. And your white blood cells will attack the source, trying to build a sarcophagus, a tumor around it. That's ultimately what will happen, right? So you would have, for every iodine-131, which was at 20 million per liter, there was 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129, which was that study from a Canadian Ottawa study. And you can't have, if you got plumes of this magnitude, these are absurd numbers, with a 15 million year half-life, these are more than enough. By the way, the 132 to 133 iodines are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid gland than the 131 is, which is incredibly effective. And so you have this absurd amount of just these three isotopes. These are absurd numbers, never conceived, perceived pre-Fukushima. 20 million particles, and a particle will increase your exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. You had 40 million atoms per beta kelp of iodine-131, because that's where it washes down to the coastlines. You had 1 million atoms per square meter disposition on the ground of xenon-133, which burns a hole through your lung, by the way. You had massive plutonium-239 dispersal based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. I've launched research expeditions for 6 years from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And the species to your left are exterminated. That's why we went back so many times to see if the species to your left recovered, right? And they didn't. They're exterminated because of radioactive fallout. That model to your top left is 20 days of radioactive fallout. The bottom one here is 19.6 days, 5 days, from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. This is why all the whales are emaciated, and why you see an unusual mortality event for almost every species now. Thousands and thousands of emaciated whales. And they're going to try to blame it on everything, of course. You left absurd amount of people in a nuclear wasteland. All of this is to protect the nuclear industry. They sacrificed every species, every human on the entire planet to protect the nuclear industry. Do you really think not holding them accountable is the solution? 1 million times, the 1 million to 10 million times, this is the French government, IRSN, the French government, of cesium-137 per liter of rainfall, or cubic meter of air. This model was only based on 16 days. This study is based on 16 days. We're in real trouble. And every nuclear power plant, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. Right? The fuel pools are reactor cores with no containment. They're still splitting atoms for millions of years. And why are they all surrounded by farms, as far as you can see? These are all the most frightening, unimaginable. And the studies are based on external exposures, not internal exposures. We know people were breathing it in because we covered, the air mass was saturated with so much. I showed you so many studies of the radioactive fallout, because it's the same plume, they're just different studies and different isotopes. I'm doing this because I love you people. I love your planet. I love the species. And I want to see everybody have some kind of a future. I don't want to see just perpetual diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and cancers. In the first year after Fukushima, cancer in just Japan alone rose by an excess spike of 865,000 people. So did everybody have health care and get diagnosed? Did everybody get diagnosed? No, of course not. Did lots of people die from heart attacks and everything else? Of course they did. It's not just cancer. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary. In the United States, this study was upgraded a few weeks later to 20,000 excess heart attacks people died of in just a couple of weeks period post-Fukushima. And there was similar numbers for babies. The official study came out, we covered it, we've done a special video on this story here, into external exposures. Look at all the people that made a fortune on it. And if you put in internal, you found no matches. Right? Internal was purple, pink rather, with no matches. You put in external doses and natural radiation. You're doing a study in a nuclear wasteland, and you quantify moving people in there by studying natural stuff, not man-made stuff, and by studying external doses, not internal doses. You should lose all respect for every academic on the planet until this industry is held accountable. Every academic on the planet has failed us by remaining silent. Radioactive cesium, now originally there was dissenting voices. That's why you see these particular types of headlines. The Kellogg cereal from Japan, 20 becquerels a kilogram. Remember I showed you earlier, 11 becquerels a kilogram will cause significant damage to a child's heart, not counting everything else. And they study external. It's hard to comprehend, that the industry has been doing this for 80 years, this kind of evil, and nobody's holding them accountable. And journalists, of course, their first question was, should we cover it up? Should we ignore it?
My name is Martin Fackler. I am the Tokyo Bureau Chief. And the title, as we just heard, was Challenges and Opportunities After the Fukushima Nuclear Disaster, this crisis management. And the question of what do you tell your public? Do you tell them that there's a serious nuclear accident, or do you play it down? Do you try to cover it up?
These people should be held accountable under the racketeering laws. You can do it under the racketeering laws, right? I mean, they're harvesting food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. Right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. Now, like, if you told someone that on the street, they're going to think you're a whack job, right? They're like, what are you, crazy? I'm crazy. You can be crazy, too. It's okay to be crazy. These people are insane. The industry is actually insane. Okay, all right. Astounding, like Japan itself is just horrifying. They call nuclear carbon free. Can you imagine what the power bill is in 24 hours just building this site? You wrap your mind around that statement? These and they're surrounded by farms, but dedicated 24 hours a day. They have 2 gas, oil, or coal plants, typically coal because it's cheaper, right? And they're dedicated to that site to build it, which is 15 plus years, to run it for its entire life, and then to maintain it and decommission it. You need 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. And look at the resources, the incredible, everything on this site, by the way, is triply inspected by 3 separate companies that don't work with each other, will inspect the same pipe, the same nailed, everything. Everything is triply inspected. It's like James Lewis blessed us with another song. And when you look at that same site, or it's a similar site in the United Kingdom, surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Oh no, it's carbon free, Dan. It's the most resource intensive. It's the biggest construction site in human history, and it's the most resource intensive site in human history. And they come out and tell you that it's like smoking cigarettes or eating peanut butter or spending 20 days in a car. This depiction comes from a presentation by Dr. Robert Gale, who does transplants. And so he radiates your loved ones, kills all your cells, and then tries to stick a pig heart in you or something. Of course, he knows you're going to die, and 99% of you die right away. And he's down there telling the homeless and destitute that are working at Fukushima that working at Fukushima, you're going to get the same dose as kayaking for 15 minutes. Smoking 14 cigarettes, not a day, but over your lifetime. I can play the video if you like. This him right there, actually. Like, there's insanity, and then there's this. It's criminal. What they're doing is criminal.
So, for example, coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01, and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
She kills children with radiation for kicks. There's Dr. Jerry Thomas, she's also a professor, and in her spare time she radiates children, because children are not a threat to her, right? You tell me that's not a monster? Explain to me then, what is a monster if that's not a fucking monster? Excuse the language, my apologies. Sue me. Alright, so we got lucky. James is feeling like putting out another song. This first song I had tonight was from James Lucett's website. Oh, Bride Whale. Because you mentioned that in the comments earlier. He was working on. When he says that, that means he's trying to put another song together. Or he's almost finished, right? So we're going to play that. I'm going to adjust the volume on my end in real time. Oh, I forgot how that works. I'm stupid tonight. And I had to go early because I knew I was going to burn out, right? So frig it, I'll just go ahead and do the video. At least we get a show done. If I had to wait it, we probably wouldn't have got the show in the night. Anyway, you have a great night. I'm going to close the poll shortly. Should humanity go to war against the nuclear power industry to try to save the species from extinction? I'm going to close that in about 4 minutes. That's how long the song is. We got so many emaciated whales. It's just so heartbreaking. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show. And if you can donate out there, you've never been here before, you'll find links in the bottom of my description. If you don't, who will, right? Have a great one. Hugs for everybody. Take care now.
Something had changed. The cold was shallow. The fish ran thin. The cloud was broken, and the deep didn't echo back. I fed where the wall used to shimmer, where the bait line swam like breath. But the lines had scattered early, and the pulse dissolved to thread. I turned where the upwell cracked, and the krill began to split. And the schools moved without reason, and the water had no grip. I followed the cloud like memory, where the silver mass should spin. But the shape dissolved in silence, and the call I knew grew thin. I passed the line where warmth should fall, and nothing answered back. So I followed cold that tasted wrong, and the current split the track. Oh, Brutus whale, what you doing up in BC, yeah. Oh, Brutus whale, what pulled you far from where the feed would be? The echoes came with static now. The bottom lost its tone. I turned to hear the shelf again, but the signals weren't my own. Where it should fade, and the pressure bays where kelp was still not swayed. The tides were tight, the swell was wrong, the feeding signs betrayed. And when I lay upon the stone, no shadow came to find. Just watch her standing silent at the edge of what unwinds. Oh, Brutus, where